in cell biology, anatomy. So that's who I am. So is everybody here mostly postdocs? Everyone postdocs?
1, 2, 3,
You might
4, 5, 6.
Don't shake your head.
Who's
2
not
grad students.
Who's not a postdoc? What are you?
I'm a graduate student in microbiology.
Okay.
I'm a grad student in lab chemistry.
Okay. So
Should we
y'all
not- should we
soon
not
to
do
be
it?
postdocs? No, you should be.
It really doesn't change very
I'm
much.
going to say I have 2 years left, but I've been saying that for 2 years now, so.
Any moment now. Spontaneous graduation.
Is that how that works?
Pretty much. You know, one day they just kick you out and say, we're not paying you anymore.
Who would it be now?
Right.
And so all of you are here to learn about CVs.
I just came for the conference.
You can't blame me for that.
Thank you.
Okay. So let's see. I was telling Mike, I don't know that I'm necessarily like a guru for CVs, but he pointed out, well, I got the job here, so I must have done something right. So anyway, Okay, so introducing myself again, Ed Glasscock, new professor, assistant professor in cell biology. I did my graduate work at UC Berkeley, and then in 2005, I graduated and then moved on to a postdoc at Baylor College of Medicine in Houston, where I worked for, I guess, 7 years till I came here. And I guess I consider that all a postdoc, although, you know, as you progress, they start calling you different things, instructor or whatever. But anyway, I would consider that a postdoc. And so, in my case, when I was at like your position and your position when I was a graduate student, and I would say this is good advice in general, you know, especially as you're beginning to see the light at the end of the tunnel, because, you know, for most of the time, at least in my case, you have family, friends, when are you going to graduate, when are you going to graduate? Like, I don't know whenever my project works out, right? But once you see the light at the end of the tunnel, you know, you kind of start thinking about, well, what now, right? And so obviously, if you want to continue on in academia, you're thinking, I'll go do a postdoc. Or maybe you want to go do biotech, or maybe you're burned out on science and just want something else. But either way, if you're starting to consider like a postdoc, you need to start considering like, well, what type of postdoc and how am I going to get it? And so part of that is putting together a CV. In my case also, this is kind of an aside, not really related to CVs, but when looking for postdocs, you know, it's a good idea to, if you know a lab that you're interested in, I say just shoot off an email to the PI and ask them to say, I really like your work, I feel like I could really, my career would really benefit by getting to spend time in your lab as a postdoc. Do you have any positions available? You know, so you don't have to look for positions that are listed. Granted, this day and age, back when I did that to get my postdoc, the funding situation was a little different. There was more money out there. So I get that now it's probably a little bit more challenging, but still, I think it's good to reach out to people when you search for a postdoc, because at least for me, I've been looking for a postdoc in my lab, and if someone were to reach out to me, it would be more than if someone just responded to a listing I had, because most of the people who respond to a listing, they're just looking for a job. They don't really care about what you do per se. You know what I mean? Okay, so then those of you who are postdocs, are you interested in CVs from the standpoint of getting another postdoc, or from getting a faculty job, or what types of things are you? What are your goals? Faculty.
More
Okay.
teaching science.
Okay. Anybody else? Is that mostly it?
Research faculty.
Research faculty. Okay. Well, so anyway, so this is kind of, I only have a few slides, and I'll show you some example CVs I had. But so when you think about putting together your CV, the first things you need to ask are like basically, what are your goals? Are you looking for, if you're looking for a faculty job, are you wanting one that's teaching heavy, research heavy, or maybe it'll be a combo of both? It may depend on whether you're applying for a job at a medical school, for example, here. you know, I have to do some teaching, not really much here at first. Eventually I'll have to do more, and you have to do some to get tenure eventually, but you know, if you don't have much of an undergraduate population where you are, you may not have to do much teaching and maybe more research heavy. So anyway, you need to think about the job you're applying for. Are you wanting, do you want it to be research or teaching heavy or a mix? And then think about, and then also too, whether you're looking at an academic setting or like a biotech corporate setting, because then you may want to emphasize different things. Like if you're looking at more of a biotech, I would imagine maybe, depending on what the job was, maybe you want to emphasize some of your skills and technical knowledge more maybe. And so then also the second bullet point is, what are your strengths and skills? So I would say, you know, always play to your strengths, try to play up what the strong points of your CV are, try to emphasize those and make those where those really stick out. And again, if you're looking for like a research faculty position, make sure anything related to research really pops out. When you're looking at a teaching heavy position, really try to play up your teaching. It's kind of common sense, but you know, when it's common sense, and yet you still have to kind of step back from your CV and look at it and kind of, you know, you could hand it to other people and say, what stands out to you about this? Does it get across to you that I am great at research or great at teaching? You know, you want to kind of format it and design it in a visually pleasing way that kind of plays up your strengths. And so this is a very long list of typical sections that you would probably include in a CV. And I pulled this off of a website. MIT has online a PowerPoint presentation that at the end of this talk I have a link to it. It kind of walks you through putting together a CV, and it's kind of a good resource. Anyway, this was just pulled from their presentation. And listen, you probably already know this. You know, you want your name and contact information at the top, and you know, you don't really need to write CV on it or curriculum vitae because it's kind of understood. That's what it is. You know. Obviously, you want to mention your education, especially if you're a graduate student looking for a postdoc. I would definitely put something about your dissertation, such as the title or topic, maybe a line or two about it. Any fellowship awards you want to mention, play those up. Don't overlook things that you may think are insignificant, such as if you got a travel award somewhere, if you go to a meeting, definitely put that on there. Anything you had to compete for, put that on there. Any departmental awards, anything like that. Research experience, obviously, that includes your postdoc or graduate school career. If you did stuff as an undergraduate, I would put that. Teaching experience. So in my case, I did a postdoc. Well, when I was in graduate school, we had the TA classes, so that comprised some teaching experience. But then when I was a postdoc, it was at a medical school where there's really no opportunity to teach. And so that part of my CV, I would say, is lacking. So in that case especially, don't overlook things that you could kind of count as teaching, such as mentoring graduate students if you're a postdoc. You know, it may seem kind of like a stretch, but I think it's definitely worth including, you know, especially if you want to mention them by name or whatever, you know. Or do something where it doesn't sound quite so nebulous, like mentor pre-graduate students and this technique and that technique, that type of thing. I think that's important. Or if you happen to give a lecture somewhere, just even a single lecture as part of a class, you know, include that. And then usually towards the end of your CV is where you'll include things about publications. I would also include anything about presentations. So if you attended any national meetings or any top meetings and gave a poster or a talk, definitely mention those. Publications, you know, that's kind of self-explanatory. We'll get to more about that in a second. Some other things you may or may not include would be some of these things like skills. I think that the skills section matters more probably if you're a graduate student. I think, like if you're a graduate student and you're going to apply for a postdoc, I would play up the skills you acquired as a graduate student so that they know as a postdoc what you're bringing to the lab. However, if you're applying to a faculty job, I personally don't really think skills matters that much, because for most people, you're not really going to be doing anything anymore. It's going to be the other people in your lab. So granted, you may have to train them at first, but it's not going to be you. And it should also kind of be a little bit Well, it'll kind of be a little bit intuitive from looking at your paper titles that you published. Also, too, I didn't mention this, but I think also whenever you go to apply for any of these jobs, whether they request it or not, I would always include a cover letter. Because I think that the cover letter gives you an opportunity to maybe get across a little bit more of your personality. And I think that a cover letter sometimes might be a more appropriate place to mention some of the skills you've acquired. And also, I think that gives you an idea to kind of, the cover letter is important because it gives you a place to say why you are relevant to the job being listed. Like you can try to say how your past experience dovetails into what this new job is, so it doesn't just look like I'm applying for this job because I don't have money or something. Like, you know, like you can say like, I have experience in this, this, and this, and I would like to join your lab because you have expertise in this skill that I would like to acquire, or I'm interested in this question that is related to my previous experience, or, you know, say something like I'm trying to broaden my, you know, breadth or depth of expertise. Just make something where it seems like you're actually interested in the lab in particular and not just need a job. Because at least for me, when I've read people's applications for jobs I listed, I kind of just, you know, deep six them from the beginning if I don't feel like they really are interested in what we're doing. So, oh, another thing is professional associations. Usually that's in things that I would say are pretty common. You know, if you're a member of whatever, I'm interested in neuroscience, so I would list things like if I'm a member of Society for Neuroscience, those types of things. Leadership and activities, I don't know what that might include. Maybe if you run a postdoc association, I would put that. Anything like that. Research interest is actually probably not necessarily something you might include as a graduate student looking for a postdoc, but that's really important if you're a postdoc looking for a faculty job. In fact, I would put that up near the top because that's kind of, to some degree, a statement of what your purpose is, what you envision your lab as. And that's, again, something that you would draw out in your cover letter. Areas of expertise is kind of like your skills. I would mostly do that if you were like a graduate student looking for a postdoc, or if you were trying to get a research associate job. They're prepared to teach, obviously, might be important if you were looking for a teaching heavy job. And then finally, the references would probably be the very last thing you put on your CV. And usually I think it's good to list 3 people as your references with their contact information, making very sure that you told them you listed them as a reference, so you don't want them to be caught out of the blue. And you know, you want to ask them, is it okay too? Because then you kind of get a feel for if they even like you or not. Because you don't want to have somebody who you secretly made mad or they don't care much for you, and then they get contacted, and that's the difference between you getting a job or not. I can put this up near the end. This was some of these are these websites. They're extremely long, so I don't know that you could write that all down. Maybe call it smartphone and take a picture of it. I don't know. But the last one is the one I was looking at, kind of where they were showing some of those lists.
First one's very good. First one's.
Yeah, if you just look up, do a Google search of postdoc CV or something like that, it'll probably come up with some of these things.
Is there a way you can send it to us?
I can. If you can email me and I can send it to you, or
You can email me and I'll send it through.
okay, I can do that. So anyway, I can put this up again at the end. I'll switch off this so we can look at some kind of example CVs. And just ask me questions throughout this. Like, I want this to be useful. I don't really know what questions you might have. You may have more specific questions, like, is it a good idea to do this or that?
Well, how much do you change your CV from job to job?
For me, I don't think I changed my CV much at all, but granted I was looking for the same types of jobs, meaning research intensive, not both. Now, I think it's really probably if you're looking between some that were more research heavy and some that were teaching, maybe you might modify some. But I guess for me, I would try to modify it. The modifications that I would make would be more to my cover letter, so that the cover letter made it seem more tailored, not usually so much to the CV.
Do you include details of what you were doing in your postdoctoral grad school into the CV? Let's say you say a postdoc at Baylor College of Medicine,
Yeah.
2005 to 2012, present, and the details of the project, what is accomplished, or you did.
I personally didn't. I don't know that it's bad to do that. It's good to at least get across the flavor of what you did. And so I think in my case, I tended to try to do that a little more in the cover letter than in the CV. But I would probably try to get that across somehow or other. And I guess there's a question as to how much depth you want to go in. I don't know, the only problem I guess I have with it is that if you do a postdoc, it's harder to say, I have this project and this is what I do. Because usually, especially if you're a postdoc for like 3 or 4 years, you have a lot of different projects, and so it may be hard to, keep them all straight. And I don't know, sometimes, and I think I have an example of one of these where somebody sent me a CV that was just so much text. After a while, you're like, I just don't want to read all this, you know what I mean? And so that's one thing you have to watch out for, I think, is that kind of gets into the visually pleasing aspect. If you don't want it to look like it's going to take someone a whole lunch break to read your CV,
How big should it be?
The MIT thing said about somewhere in 2 to 6 page range. I think that's decent. I mean,
Yeah.
Well,
Yeah. I think I received one in here that's like 30 pages. We're like, that's
30?
too long. Something like that. I mean, it's too long. But just be reasonable. If you really have it bulleted, I mean, you can probably get away with it being longer because it doesn't seem like it's as long even though it is.
Well, I remember hearing from some of the, I guess, the executive assistants at various places, especially like the one that was directly under my PI, was that at certain positions there's a certain range. So a graduate student into a postdoc is maybe 1 to 2 pages at most. Anything more than that, unless it's like science papers, like nobody cares. It's like, just make sure you can spell your name right and it's, for the appropriate people. But then as you go into the faculty, criteria, then it increases significantly. And then you go to like, people who are going for like chair positions and directors, they get the CVs that nobody actually reads. It's just like, you just assume that it's all correct. Because I remember, I saw this one CV, like my mentor actually handed me his CV. He was a director of a center. And it's like a dictionary. It's like, what is all this? It's like 200 papers that are, cited, but nobody's going to look at that. So it's like, does that really play in, significantly in your experience? Like, there's usually an acceptable range unless you're somehow exceptional.
I mean, I would think for postdocs, you wouldn't really need it more than 10 pages. I mean, I don't know. It'd be hard to even fill 10 probably. I mean, unless you're going to write out
Mine is 5 including, 6 including reference.
I think that's perfectly
And
fine.
6th page is just references, and 1 page publications.
Yeah, I think
So,
that's fine.
Essentially, it's like
So this is an example of my cover letter, even though we're talking CVs, but this was, whenever I applied here, this was my cover letter, just to give you an idea of what it looks like and how I got across what my goals are. So if you look at the beginning, what I just said, what I was ready to apply for, I basically said where I was and where I trained, right? And then down here, in this case, I was fortunate enough to have a K99 award, and so definitely I was going to play that up because that's a huge bargaining chip. So if you have any sort of advantage like that, put it up front where there's going to be no way they're going to miss that. Like that's what I attempted to do here. And then obviously, if you're looking for a faculty job, the thing that's different going from graduate student to postdoc is now basically you're supposed to be the visionary, right? You're the one steering the ship, and so they want to know you have a plan. I don't know how common it is, but and some of you maybe have experienced this already. But a typical thing, well, not typical, but some places they want you to be able to do like a chalk talk during your interview. So have you guys heard about the chalk talks? I only had to do it one place, and it was actually at Baylor, where I was applying to stay there as a professor. But So you have like your seminar talk, which is kind of self-explanatory, but then your talk is where you're supposed to kind of give your vision of the future, kind of in a, this is what I'm going to do the first like 3 to 5 years when I get the job, and then this is my long-term goals for like a 10-year plan. And basically, it's almost like you're verbally having to give them an R01 or the vision for your first R01 or 2. So it's very challenging to do. But anyway, the bottom line is you need to appear like you're competent and you have a plan and you kind of you can see the road ahead. And so that's kind of what I tried to do here by saying this is my focus, this is my short-term goal. And I tried to play up things that I thought made me different. It may come a little bit weird, at least for me it's sometimes weird to write things like this because you have to kind of put humility aside but not appear like you're putting humility aside, you know what I mean? This is kind of a little bit of a dance you have to do there. But you know, play up your strengths, make yourself stand apart. Anyway, so any questions about that? That just gives you an idea of
How? Because it's just that statement that you just made, it reminds me of all the instances in which, you know, someone who knows me really well and they're willing to write a letter of recommendation, but they won't actually write it. It's like, yeah, just, you know, write it and then I'll check it and sign off for, you know, a lot of times that happens with especially like busy, you know, faculty and professors and stuff. So like, how do you kind of gauge what's too much? You know, it's like you don't want to be braggadocious like you're saying, but it's like you have to say like, well, you know, I was the only person to do
That's
this.
a hard
I was
question.
the first to do this.
Yeah, you just don't want to come across as too like, I don't know, syrupy and disingenuous. It's kind of hard to know where that line is. Because yeah, you're right, that happens all the time. People say, that's great, I'll write your recommendation, which means that you'll write it and I'll sign it. Which makes you wonder how many recommendations are ever even real. I don't know.
Right.
But I heard an excellent point, not about recommendation, but about bragging about yourself in the cover letter. You can brag all you want, but you must be able to prove everything that's in there.
Mm-hmm.
So if you're saying, I first did this ever, you better first did this, you know? Not so if it turns out that you first did this in the lab, that's a bad sign. You know, so I can teach all the biology, provided proofs. So bragging should be.
Notice too the way I phrased this. I pioneered the study of this in our lab. I'm not saying I did it first time ever.
Yeah. That's.
But you know, for me this was important because part of a K99 is you have, and really anybody viewed in general, you need to be able to set yourself apart from your PIs and your mentors. Because what good are you if you're just a clone of them, right? You need to show you have your own creative abilities. And so that's kind of my way of saying, because the PI I work for at Baylor, Jeff Nobles, I study epilepsy and mouse genetics, and so he's kind of like the guru for that, right? And so I didn't want to appear like all I am is just being in his shadow, and so I tried to emphasize how I was different with this. So anyway, does that make sense? Who else is there? Okay.
And your cover letter is about a page long, right?
Just exactly a page. I didn't go for a page. So this is what my CV looks like. I'm big on appearance and fonts and formatting. So to me, at least, I thought this was a very clean way of doing it, where it just doesn't look cluttered. I just like the simplicity aspect. There's no right or wrong way. Well, there could be a wrong way, but you know.
You go back in time, right?
I think, yeah, I generally do. Yeah. Notice, let's put my name very simply, contact info. Notice I don't have an objective statement. I don't care for objective statements. Maybe if you're a graduate student, you might want to do that. You at least want to put your objectives somewhere, but cover letter may be more appropriate, but if you're a graduate student, maybe you'd want to put it here. But do a good objective statement. Don't do something like, well, you'll see some later on, but they're, you know, make it appear like like there's a reason why that lab, like you're trying to your graduate student trying to get a job in the lab, make it hear why that lab matters to you, you know. And obviously, if you're responding to a job listing, in some ways the objectives don't really matter because, I mean, your objective is to do the job that was listed. I mean, you know, it's like, it's kind of implied, is what I'm saying. And then I like, if you're applying for a faculty job, to put your research interest right up at the beginning. These are the 4 I listed. And these are basically, your research interests are essentially, that's really what the bread and butter, what the goals of your lab that you're planning on starting, that's what they are. I also tried to make mine purposely a little bit specific, but also, you might say, I'm interested in a correlation of proteins that do this, you know, something like that. And then the next thing I like to do is put education and training. I started with most recent postdoc and then PhD and BS.
So do you, that's the latest you go back? You don't bother with school on that?
Oh, for like secondary school, high school?
Yeah.
No, I wouldn't do that. Also, notice for contact info, I keep it, well, okay, so this is my one now. This isn't the one I applied for. That's why I have the LSU stuff, right? Before I have my other address. But don't give too much information. You'll see on some of these things, like, people don't need to know if you're married or not. They don't need to know.
People put that on there?
Well, it's mostly international ones I've seen, I think. We don't need to know if you have kids. We don't need to know what their names are. We don't need to know who your parents were. I mean, you think I'm very bad, I've seen it. We don't need to know, you know, just say any one of those things. Now having said all that, something that you might want to include if you are international, you might want to include like a visa status, something like that, because that could be important. That's not a bad thing to do. Or say like if you're a citizen of another country, that would probably be important. But don't be overly. I mean, you know, you're giving away your privacy. I mean, you don't need to have like a social security number and stuff on there. You know, be reasonable. And then also too, some of that stuff they just don't care about. You know, research experience. This is how I did it. I just went reverse chronological. I listed everywhere I did undergraduate research. Let's see. I guess that's really it. I also changed it up according to what I was denoted as change, like a post-doctoral fellow, research associate. Where I was is kind of different from where it is here. Research associate is like a postdoc level thing. Instructor, professor. So teaching and mentorship. So I've kind of modified this now, but before, like I said, I would put on there mentor graduate students and junior postdocs and these things. Mentor graduate student and undergraduates in this. And this was because I didn't have a ton of teaching experience. Now, if you were going to apply for a teaching heavy job, maybe you might want to put teaching before research. You know, if it's like some liberal arts school where you're mostly going to be teaching, that's what you want to play out. They may care about you having a research experience, but they really want to see the teaching experience. And then honors and grants awarded. Like I said, like here, this one thing, I won this one Young Investigator Award, put something like that. A Gordon Conference Travel Award, make sure I mention that. I went ahead, I don't know, some people may have different thoughts on this, but like when I graduated undergraduate, I was considered cum laude. I would put that. I was in an engineering honors program for 1 year until I got a B, and so then I put that because I was in it for 1 year. And then publications. And again, this is kind of personal preference. I like to do the most recent first and then go backwards. And then I started numbering them reverse order too, so it's clear how many I had. Once you get really far along, you'll see people where you'll say, I'm listing 20, but I have 90 peer reviewed. You know, you'll say I selected 20 selected out of 100 total or something. I don't have that luxury at this point.
Do you put manuscripts in preparation on
I would.
Okay.
Obviously, it's not going to carry as much weight as like this one where I have impress, but I would definitely put it.
I'm going
Or I would put the different levels I would say are there's in preparation, submitted, and in press, or under revision maybe.
If it's in press or revision, yeah, but I was told by, I'm saying it's subjective totally, but I was told by someone else that if you put it, it's like you're trying to pad it out, and as soon as someone sees it, it's like, well, they haven't actually done anything, so they're trying to like fill lines
Okay.
with it. I don't know. I guess people see it.
Yeah, I mean, if you don't have any publications really, I would definitely put whatever you can. If you have plenty and you have a plethora and don't really need that other in preparation, then maybe you wouldn't mention it. I included book chapters here. One thing I like to do, and this is up to you, but I like the idea of emphasizing which journal it's in, especially if you have some high-profile journals. I also, although I didn't do it here, I also like the idea of either maybe bolding or underlining your name so people can see where you are on the author list. Make sure all of this stuff is accurate. I've gotten ones too where I've seen somebody applied for it and I happened to check a few and like the authors left off of ones they listed, and like there was one where they listed themselves as like a second author when really they're like a third or fourth or something. And so, you know,
Not good.
I mean, science is you have to be precise, right? And so if they came together a CV, you know, you don't want them in your lab. And then this is the abstracts conference presentation, and I kind of like doing it this way, where this is like all your stuff you present at meetings. I like kind of like the idea of putting the title, the year, the title of your lecture, or title of your abstract, whatever. I like the idea of saying what it was, like an invited lecture, or later on, I have ones that were just like abstracts or posters. See, like abstract, things like that. See, I kind of like the idea of doing that. You know, you could put like poster or abstract, whatever it was. And I think this is all important because it shows that you're an active participant in the scientific community. You know, to me that's important. It shows that you're not just in your own little bubble, that you're mingling with other scientists. So I think it's good. And so all of this stuff, it kind of goes without saying, but you should always be updating your CV because it's really easy to forget stuff. So always be updating it. If you notice mine, I have a label of October 2013, so whenever I change it, I retitle it. Then I have professional societies. Now for this, I don't know how you want to do this, but I think it's, like for example, I have Society for Neuroscience, 2005 to basically to the present. I haven't actually been current all of those years, because it's weird because you have to pay every year, and so usually I just pay whenever I go to meetings, so usually I go like every other year. So in my case, I don't put 2005, 2007, 2000. I just put 2005 for president. I think that's okay, even though it may not be exactly, honest, but you know, I think that's okay. This is something I saw someone else do, which if you have the ability to do this, I think it's kind of a cool thing. If any of your hub papers have resulted in some sort of write-up, either like a press release at the school or been mentioned somewhere else, maybe some other article published a comment on it in a journal or something, I think it's kind of good to, I like the idea of doing this because it kind of shows that your papers actually had some sort of impact also.
It'd be nice to be able to do that.
It was easier where I came from too because Baylor has a really good PR system.
Mm-hmm.
They publish press releases for article all the time for stuff that's done there. Here, I haven't seen that that's ever done here. It's kind of unfortunate, but.
Right. It's like our published paper.
And then of course research support is important. You want to show that you've been able to compete for and get grants. This kind of gives people ideas of what some of your projects were. And then finally references. I would list who they are, contact info, and make sure you talk to each of them. Any questions about that?
So in this, I think we've had a whole, meeting or seminar on this already, but when you have your CV and you're kind of going like a teaching route, so say you're going to a big university that really only has undergraduate research. So you're going to do research, but you're probably going to be doing teaching. Where does the teaching statement fit in a CV? Like, is it?
Oh, you know what? That brings up a good point, and I had forgotten this until just now pretty much. Okay, so when you apply for faculty jobs, you're actually going to have to do three things. You're going to have a cover letter, you're you're going to have your CV, and then you're going to have basically a personal statement. And that personal statement, I forget, is usually 2 to 3 pages long, and that's going to have your personal statement on your research focus and your teaching. And so that's where you would put it.
Okay.
In my case, my statement, I think is like 2 pages long. The teaching is like this long at the end, because I mean, I didn't have a ton of experience. I wasn't applying for a job that required a lot, and I didn't want to just BS all the stuff that was meaningless. So,
How can you differentiate between a cover letter and a personal statement? Without
well,
being graded?
I wish I didn't think about the cover letter, so I didn't include one, but I think that the cover letter is kind of a very brief snapshot of who you are, where you're coming from, and what your goals and why you go where the job is. But the personal statement is much more in depth. Like we're talking like it's 2 pages long or 3 of you basically giving your research interest, describing your research interest, and I would say kind of you. In my case, I like to describe it as my evolution as a scientist, kind of like, in my case, I was fortunate enough to have a kind of a defined career arc. Like in graduate school, I studied seizure susceptibility in the fruit fly. And then for postdoc, I went and studied basically seizure susceptibility in mice. And then, so basically I kind of had that arc where I could say how this is what I was originally interested in. And then I branched out and acquired these skills there. And then along the way, made these discoveries. And so now as I'm starting my lab, this is what I'm interested in. So you can kind of show how you got to where you are now, while kind of talking about other, skills you acquired or discoveries you made, or things like that. That makes sense, kind of.
It's more related to your research. You're not really talking about your awards or anything like that. It's just research related.
I think it's usually when they ask for them, I think they usually call it like a statement of research interest. I forget how they
Yeah,
phrase it.
statement of research interest.
Yeah.
We actually had one similar in that. In a lot of places, they pretty much ask for an introduction to the ROM lab. So you write background, specific aims, and briefly what you're going to do. That's research statement in a lot of places. That's what they do. Not 4, 5, 6 pages, but just 1 page review.
Okay, the personal statements I'm used to is you talk about your life and why you want to do something.
No, this is very focused on research and what I would say it's kind of like it's kind of I think in mine I would probably split it halfway between what I intend to do and then what I've done. But you could probably do another hour-long session on putting that together. And all of these things I would take a lot of time, spend a lot of time doing them, especially that research statement. That's extremely important, and that's not something you're just going to whip out over a few hours. You need to write it, reread it, rewrite it. And then also too, I guess you notice I thought it was good to say who these people were, so they're not just random people I listed. You can see who they were in relation to me.
I'm sorry,
yeah.
Did you put your CV online on these social sites like LinkedIn or ResearchGate? Okay.
No, I would, in my case, I looked on science jobs, and that's where this job was listed. I also contacted people, like if there were departments where there were people where I thought my interests would be complementary to theirs and I thought I would fit in, I would just write the department chair and say, got this grant, I'm looking for this job, do you have any openings or thing like that? And I actually got at least 2 interviews that way.
Huh, I didn't know you could do that. I thought it was illegal to apply for a job if there wasn't a job there to.
Yeah, so I mean, just always reach out. I mean, it's harder now because people don't have much money putting around to do it,
But it becomes your own.
It's not illegal, just a chance,
You know what I mean?
because maybe they're about to list a job or
Yeah.
something, you just never know. Or maybe they had some extra money laying around and they're not actively looking, but they're waiting for the right person. I mean, you never know.
And it's sincere interest that you
Yeah.
express in the part.
Yeah. Pick places where it would make sense for you to go there,
Oh, yeah.
Don't just pick University of Hawaii because I want to.
On the other hand, it's, well, to be fair, sometimes, especially as being grad student / postdoc, and more postdoc, second postdoc, Sometimes you are in a situation where you really need the job and you just have to come up with some fake explanation that you're interested. You probably are interested, but it's not logical from your previous experience. Because I had this, I needed a job, and Karen, who's my current boss, she asked me, what's the deal, why do you want to come to me?
Yeah.
I said, well, I need to stand you.
Yeah.
It worked out perfectly. But you have to weigh things, and and sincere interest, I think, is much more important.
Yeah, I think that's true. Even if, you just need a job, if you can at least express that sincere interest, that goes a long way. And especially if you're either graduate students, definitely contact labs where they might be your dream to study under so-and-so. Contact them, because that will go a long way. I would love if somebody contacted me and said, you know what, I'd love to study this and that, your lab seems like a place. That'd be like, great, So, obviously they have to have money, but they may be more willing to find the money if they think that you're good. Okay, so if there's no question, yeah.
I've had seniors who did this, what you just said, but they never even got a reply from any of them.
Oh.
So,
Well,
How many-
it might be fine to resend it if you didn't get a reply at all, and then if you've done it a few times unheard, then
How many applications?
I don't know, they keep sending tons.
Tons.
I mean, but first they would pick which place they're interested in. They would send
120
them out.
first time and 120 second time. 4 responses first time, 2 responses second time.
Well,
So, and that wasn't a good money situation.
Well, I mean, in my experience, I've definitely had the no call, the no response kind of situation. And sometimes one of my mentors, he told me, it's like, you have to think about it like this. Like, if you don't have what we call big dogs in your corner, it's really hard to grease some wheels. But there's also the advantage of knowing how certain systems work. So if you were to call a PI, say at Harvard, that you have no connection to, trying to contact that person directly may not ever work, because that's not how it works there. You have to contact their assistant, and once their assistant, gives you a green light, you have them. Even me getting my job here, I never applied or even made a direct phone call. My thesis work was going a certain route, and one of the people I collaborated with did his training with Kevin. So when I told him, I just blurted out Searchland. I was like, yeah, it's got to be Searchland. He's like, hey, I know a guy. And that's how it went. But for 2 other places that I contacted directly, I asked my mentor to send an email that I draft. And so when it comes with his name, people open it, It's like, oh, okay, what's this one? And of course, I made a decision to come here. But, sometimes it's kind of like you have to kind of hedge your bets a little bit, because
and be persistent, I'd say. Well, by persistent, I don't mean like haggling people with emails, but by persistence, I mean just in general, don't give up. Because, I don't know, it's something I'm real big on. This is my motivational talk part of this thing. But I'm real big on not giving up, because I think that especially like in the funding climate now, people are like, oh, you can't get an R01, no one's, the funding levels are so low. And, I say, great, quit sending in your applications, so making my chances better. So obviously, there's something to be said for not giving up, because I really feel like the people who succeed weren't necessarily the most brilliant, they weren't necessarily the shot. They're the people who didn't give up. They're the people who kept at it, and eventually you'll succeed. The people who, basically, at least for my whole life starting in college, I feel like that's the big difference, is that it's not giving up, and it's that persistence that will eventually get you over the top, I feel like. Because too many people quit, and little did they know if they just go in a little bit farther, they would have succeeded. Like, you don't know where you're going to get that break, and most people, I think, fail because they just quit a little bit too early. Okay, so I can just go through some of these. You guys can give me feedback on these. These were ones I've gotten. This is an example of where this is for a postdoc.
all your business.
Actually, I guess I should have blacked out their names or something, but
Too late.
there's their,
We don't need to remember that anyway.
there's their phone number if you want to call them. See, like, date of birth, you don't need to put that. We don't need to know that. In fact, when you're interviewing people for jobs, you're not even allowed to ask them what they are and stuff.
But they tell you, it's like,
Marital status, You don't need to tell me that. Male, well, sometimes it might be useful if you can't figure out the name, but
I know
they don't need to say that.
Yeah, but so I heard that some of the PIs actually prefer married because
Really?
they're more stable. You know, they once they hired, they're going to do whatever they have to
Yeah.
stay at the job because they don't want to move the family.
True,
That's
but if
one
you're
thing.
single too, then you wouldn't want to put single probably, I guess.
Yeah.
And like, in this case, this is an international person, so it might make sense to say like your nationality, your languages. They put a career objective. They actually organized it not too horribly. Some people like to do this, and I didn't do this on mine, maybe I should have, is had kind of like at every page have like your name with the page number. That's not a bad idea. Even though I didn't have that, but it's probably a good idea to do that. I think that was the main reason. I don't know, willingness to learn. I don't know.
I think that's the skills part.
Yeah.
Is BS part of it.
Yeah, it's a little bit BS-y. And then like computer skills, it's okay, I guess. Don't put stuff like I can do Microsoft Word and all that. I mean, it may be naive of me, but I think that that's kind of a given, right? If you made it this far, you probably know how to do Microsoft Word or
General
Excel.
use of search engines. I can
I can use all of them. I'm not-
Interest, I would probably not put this. I don't
Yeah.
know. It's a little bit.
It's actually very international. I know that a lot of Russians do it.
Yeah, it seems like it's a little bit, I don't know, it comes across almost unprofessional. Anyway, so that's that. That was one example of one where, I don't know, the formatting wasn't bad, but I don't know.
Like
Here's one. Okay, here's a cover letter I'm not big on. And granted, I don't mean to pick on international people because obviously, I mean, they're not going to speak the language as well. I understand that, but sometimes the way that the things come across, it just, I don't know whether this one may not have shown it so much. But anyway, sometimes, anyway, this wasn't a good example, but sometimes you look at these cover letters and it sounds like they'll talk to you about you like you're some sort of, you know, ruler of a country. And like they're like, most gracious professor, you know, like I'd be so honored to have the privilege to study. Anyway, it just comes across as like not genuine and like overly done. Like I'm just a person too. Like you don't need to talk to me like I'm, you know, like I'm a ruler, the most powerful ruler in the world or something.
It's a big difference, actually. We at least we taught to be very, very polite, maybe over polite. You never over polite. That's what we taught. I realized that you can just say, hey.
And I wouldn't necessarily not consider someone just because of that. I'm just saying, you know, consider how the tone of how you're writing stuff is. Why it's not going to put it in that roulette. Say that?
No, it just looks like it because nothing's highlighted.
I mean, I don't know.
Well, in a previous CV that you showed, I think one of the things, this guy had positions, and then he had projects under it. And each position, all those positions were sort of disconnected, that looked like separate chapters. And position, and then half of the page what it was doing, and I think it's quite excessive.
Right.
Because, you know.
I have to restart. I don't know why I locked up. Anyway, I guess you guys only need for an hour, so we don't need to keep going through them all. But some other examples would be, I mean, just in general, I would say, even though it doesn't really, I mean, just the formatting of what you do and how you just format it can make a huge difference. Because like, just when you're going through them, if you see one that just like visually is pleasing, you're automatically like subconsciously drawn to it, you know. So make things very clean, you know, and no typos, of course.
So there is sort of an NIH standard for CV, right?
Yeah, well, there's the NIH bioscale, which is a little bit different.
Would it be better for an application to a research institution to have your CV formatted as NIH bioscale?
You could.
Because people are more used, well, you know, professors who are in the study sections, they're used to reading this.
Yeah, I think that the only reason you might not is because you have more leeway, I think, if you do a CV.
Right.
For that reason, I don't know that I would.
I think as well, like, if I'm in an institution and I'm looking at, like, well, if I'm in an institution, if I'm at faculty of an institution, and I'll use, like, the different formats of CVs as an actual filtering system. So, like, if there are really bad ones, or if some of them are misguided, then
Here's one that wasn't too bad. I kind of liked how they put, for example, lawful permanent resident, visa not required. That's very important if you're international, I think. You know, you just kind of, they mentioned like their thesis and dissertation, which isn't a bad idea. This was kind of what you were talking about earlier. They mentioned kind of the project goals and gave a little bit more in depth about some of the projects they did. So you can kind of see how that looks on that.
But without the bullet points on there, it makes it so.
It's a little jumbled, but
Yeah.
But it's readable.
Yeah, it's readable. Publications, they did a good job of highlighting their name, and then the journals, which I kind of like. Maybe if you weren't happy with the journals you published in, maybe you wouldn't want to draw attention to that. They did this communicated under preparation manuscripts. They just listed them separately. That's not bad. It makes it look like you're not trying to just up your number, you know. Abstracts, they listed all that. They listed that type of thing. Then they listed technical skills, which I think is not bad if you're applying for a postdoc job. I think it's not necessarily necessary if you're applying for.
or is their computer software section is a little bit more.
I would actually throw, I'm probably wrong, but I would throw skills if it's for a postdoc position. I would throw skills up.
Yeah.
Because papers eventually will get there. It's more of a number rather than just papers itself. But,
This was the one, I actually had interviewed this person. It's not like it's a little bit bland, but you know, it's still organized pretty well. I thought, you know, it's not
is
bad.
there an education, an experience there?
I think it was pretty good.
Yeah, just
Education,
there.
yes.
So that's not bad.
In the UK, we write referees, but I noticed in here a lot of the people say references. Which is best?
I usually say references,
You
but
use both, you know, because if you're putting together a grant, then they'll say, you know, who are your referees? So it's kind of interchangeable, but references, I think, is our general kind of colloquial way of saying it.
this is a girl who, I shouldn't say girl, I shouldn't like my, but this is a female woman who is in my lab now, and I thought she's granted a research associate, so she didn't apply for postdoc, but so this is just an example of what I think is a really good CV, and that's part of the reason I hired her. And granted, this is different because this is not applying for a postdoc, but it's at least very well organized. It really outlines where she's been and what all of her skills are. So anyway, that's an idea. And something like this might be more appropriate if you're applying for a biotech job where you're expected to bring certain skills. You know, and it's only 2 pages, so it's manageable. So I think that's good. And then my last one that we can end on is this one. This is one of my favorites. See if you see anything odd about this application. This was for a research associate job. There's something I probably wouldn't have included in this one.
Bartender? Yeah.
Bartender. To me, if you're
What?
bartending, I don't know that I put that as like what you're. I don't know.
It's just not relevant experience.
Wait,
Yeah.
wow.
So to me, I'm thinking, that's I don't know. To me, it's just weird. And then she describes what her duties are.
Wait, this is for.
This is for a research associate.
Well, if you don't have any other experience.
Well, I mean, she can follow a recipe.
Yeah.
Hey, mixing drinks.
Yes.
If you're a chemistry lab, maybe it would be good. And let me see.
Science doesn't work. It's like, hey.
I guess she didn't mention. I guess she didn't list as a reference for Gloucester, but there is a hydrologic technician. Maybe that could be Gloucester.
Right. That sounds like.
That's possible. That's possible.
That's what they call bartenders now.
So I wouldn't list stuff like that as experience if you're applying for something, even if you have a gap, you know. Okay, so I think that's all. That's kind of all I had. But if you have any other questions, I can answer them.
So I've seen some people put in their interest or their hobbies, like.
I probably wouldn't do that. If you were applying for graduate school, maybe, but I don't think I would put it. I don't think it's relevant, and I think there's too much of a chance of saying something that might be a negative connotation or something else.
My hobby is doing science.
But know what your hobbies are, because somebody will ask you in an interview. for example, my research associate, Nikki, I purposely asked, I asked her what her hobbies were, and she told me that she was a runner and that she ran half marathons. So to me, I'm like, that shows me that she's disciplined and motivated, because nobody just goes out and runs 13 miles just for the heck of it. I mean, you have to be disciplined. So there's things you can kind of infer from what people's hobbies are that can shine positively on you or negatively.
Like my hobby's drinking.
Yeah.
Anyway, so hopefully that's helpful. They're not necessarily, I mean, you have a fair amount of leeway. It's not like you have to follow a certain formula. But it's also probably a good idea once you put together, find some people you trust and let them look at it and just give you their opinion maybe.
There's a difference between resume and CV, right?
Yeah, I mean,
I've
resumes.
seen someone, I think, which just said it was resume, but it had pretty much the same thing.
Yeah, I think that was just what they called it. Resumes are typically shorter. I think curriculum vitae can be longer. I don't know what other differences there might be.
Well, I spoke to an industry person, a friend who works in the industry, and he says that the industry loves in CV. Nobody cares about your asterisk publications, teaching, mentoring.
Yeah.
You make preferably one-page resume, in which you show your most important skills for the job, such as education, experience, and management, maybe.
Yeah.
And that's it.
Yeah.
And you may say 11 publications, 3 first of them.
Yeah.
That's it. So it should be very concise, just to
Yeah.
get attention.
Yeah.
Do you fit inside this machine that we have?
And yeah, I saw his. It's pretty much a page-long resume, and he fit enormous amount of information.
Yeah. I mean, for looking for a faculty job, I would definitely, you have to find a way to set yourself apart and maybe bring some technical expertise that's rare, or you just have a different way of looking at things. You know, you're basically you're selling yourself. You have to kind of be political and sell yourself and present yourself in a way that would be attractive if you were the one that you're looking to hire somebody. So anyway, that's all I have.
Thanks.
And feel free,